Market Journal, television for agricultural business decisions, is a presentation of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and the Gateway Farm Expo.
Hello everyone, I'm Troy Moling and thanks for joining us today on Market Journal. We're a week closer to 2020 and we are powering through November. Glad you're here with us today. And beginning the broadcast, Nebraska's winter wheat is rated 63% good to excellent with 96% of the crop emerged. In the meantime though, a recent Bloomberg article says acres of winter varieties are the lowest in over a century. I spoke with UNL's Stephen Baenziger about that and to get an overview of the current growing conditions.
When I first came here 33 years ago, we planted about 2.5 million acres of wheat, and we're probably planting just about 1 million now. So we've lost 60% of our acreage. A lot of that's due to farm programs. They get better insurance, crop insurance on corn and soybeans. Some of it's due to technology investment. You know, the whole biotech crops is huge in soybeans, it's huge in cotton, it's huge in corn. Wheat is a crop that has no transgenic plants, and that's by design. You know, the customers are cautious. What
crops do you find that farmers have been turning to instead?
Well, historically, the two crops that have lost the most would be sorghum and wheat, and the crop that's probably gained the most is soybeans. Yeah. But I think that's why they're looking for alternative crops too.
And for the farmers that did decide to plant winter wheat this year, is there going to be any sort of change in marketing or management due to the current state of the crop?
Well, historically, when the price of wheat is low, farmers have to watch their inputs. And so you're probably going to see a little bit lower fertilizer. Now, that's not a good thing because you pay a dockage if you don't have or not a dockage. You lose money if your protein isn't up. So for a small investment in protein, you may make more money than the nitrogen fertilizer costs you. And they also tend to use less fungicides. And the difficulty that you have explaining to a grower when there's an epidemic, paying for a fungicide means you will lose less money than when you don't use the fungicide. And we saw that 2 years ago, it was 3 years ago, when we had a massive scab epidemic. And growers that sprayed got a 40 bushel yield, and those that didn't spray basically destroyed the crop and they got nothing.
Okay, let's get a recap of how planting has gone this season and what the upcoming growing season may look like.
Well, the planting in most areas went pretty well. There's some rain delays. We've had a wet summer, which is great because it means our soil profile should be full for moisture. It's beginning to see a little bit of drought coming in. If you look at the drought monitor maps, you can see that down in the southwest, it's just beginning to creep in from Colorado's had some more severe drought, West Kansas, Northwest Kansas has, and it's just beginning to slip into our southwest corner. As for the season, it's too early to tell, but right now I would say most things look promising.
And as far as that, the weather, we've had that big cold snap into late October, early November. Does that change anything this early on?
Well, hopefully not, okay? The key thing to me for wheat to survive is to have a really good crown establishment. And the difficulty we have is a lot of the wheat went in late, especially on the east because we had a lot of rain delays on the east. If you're growing soybeans and you cut your soybeans, which are coming off late, and then you're going to plant wheat, you're really going to be late. So there will be some risk there. But a couple of things is that if your wheat doesn't emerge, it's probably as safe as it's ever going to be as long as it's seed treated. If it has emerged and has grown a little bit, then you've probably renewed the reserves, so the crop's probably okay. The one where it's vulnerable is where it's used its reserves and then gets frozen hard. But the soil temperature is always much warmer than the air temperature, so normally the seed and the shoot that's still in the ground is in pretty good shape.
What are some of the diseases that producers were impacted by last year, and do you think those may be an issue this year?
Well, the diseases change every year, and it's hard to predict. But last year there was a fair amount of leaf rust. There was some fusarium head blight or scab, maybe a little bit of stripe rust. But those diseases can be present every year whenever the conditions are right. And so last year we had ample rains. We had a little bit warmer temperatures. If it was cool, we probably would have had stripe rust. It was a little warmer, so we had leaf rust.
For all the wheat producers watching, any final recommendations for us?
I think, just watch your wheat, just monitor it. Don't give up on it too soon. Every real wheat grower knows that wheat's got 9 lives. We'll be surprised to see how it comes out, but I think we'll probably have a pretty good crop. I think most of the growers who've gotten their wheat in on time, from what I've seen out west, the wheat crop looks beautiful. Okay, so, we still have severe winter could come through. We still have droughts that can happen, things like that. But right now, it's setting up to be a very good wheat crop.
Thanks to Stephen for coming by. Let's switch gears to markets now. And on Tuesday, I was joined by Chad Hart. He's an Iowa State Extension Economist and crop market specialist. He had lots to say on marketing strategies if you have low quality crops, as well as recommendations for when it comes to 2020 operating decisions. But I began the interview by getting some of his big takeaways from the recent USDA WASDE report.
Well, I think when you're looking at the WASDE, it was confirmation of, okay, the size of the crops. What you saw was, after a couple of months of trying to guess lower, I think the trade and USDA kind of came together and said, yeah, we're going to look at a crop, corn yields 167 bushels per acre across the country, soybeans just under 47. So not great yields, but good yields given the weather conditions that we had. I think the other thing to look at was let's call it the concern on the usage side of the marketplace when we're looking at demand. The gear down on soybeans on the crush side, mainly reflecting the lack of soybean meal exports. On the corn side especially, I think it was troubling to see the continued trend there of lower corn exports as well. And so we know we've got some global demand issues out there for the crop side that's sort of lurking its head behind this idea that supplies have gotten a little smaller, but demand seems to be backing off even faster.
Do you think there's going to be any big adjustments on anything come January with the annual report?
Not on the supply side. I really don't think so. I think we could see some adjustments on the demand, and one of the things I'm going to be watching for, not only with the final number, on the supply side coming out in January, but as we're looking forward to the WASDE, say throughout the springtime, is do we see adjustments on both the feed and the ethanol side due to a lower quality of this corn crop, especially as we move through spring?
And I know that many analysts have their own calculations. How are your yield estimates different than what USDA is telling us?
Not that they're necessarily any different, but I think what USDA has sort of established for us and what they're sort of showing up in their data is a trend of slowly reducing this yield down. I think we will see one final little bump down on the yield numbers for both corn and soybeans, but like the previous ones, it won't be a big adjustment.
And Chad, with everything that we've said, what are some marketing strategies you can share with us?
Well, like I say, one of the biggest things I've been talking to farmers about is the quality of the crop as it's come out of the fields, and looking to sort of segment my marketing based upon that quality. For the crop that is of high quality and is easy to store, yeah, we're looking to hang on to that and hopefully looking for some better prices in the spring when we typically have our seasonal rally. But given that we do have some low quality crop coming out of the fields that coming out with higher moisture, we're not able to dry it as fast as we need to do. There's a case where I'm worried about that quality continuing to slip. So I'd rather get that crop moved through the marketplace now and then look at maybe some re-ownership strategies through the futures or options to give myself some opportunities to capture those higher prices later without having to worry about the quality of my crop slipping while it's in the bin.
If a farmer were to come to you and say, should I plant more corn or soybeans in 2020, and what's going to give me the greatest potential for profits, what answer would you tell them? Right
now, given where the futures market's at, I'm going to say corn. Because when you look out at the corn futures market prices, as we look out 2020, 2021, we're staring at prices right now that would indicate, an average cash price of around $3.90. That's a pretty good price to be able to lock in place even before we get to planting season next year. When I'm looking at soybeans, we're seeing some better prices out there as well, but not offering quite as large a possible return as corn is right now.
And when we look ahead to our 2020 operations decisions, what are some things that we can be doing?
One of the biggest things I think, and I'm watching for here, is how much are we able to do some of that fall field work that we really didn't get to do last year, in preparation here. We have seen, despite the weather problems here, a little window of opportunity here over the past week and a half to really catch up on some things, not only finish up on the harvest, but prep ourselves for next year. And I think, as I look forward for the next week and a half, I think we'll have a little more time to get ourselves ready for 2020. And that's another reason why I'm leaning towards corn a little bit more as I look towards 2020, because I think we will have that ability to get some fertilizer down, to get the fields ready to move into that crop more quickly next year.
And finally, let's look internationally for a second. Do you think South America is going to have a big impact on things this year?
They always do. Let's face it, when you're looking at the soybean market now, Brazil's now the #1 soybean producer in the world, and I think that's a title that they're not likely going to give up soon. When we're looking at the corn side, we've seen them ramp up, especially Brazil's second season corn. And so as long as they're having some pretty good crops, they're going to matter in terms of continuing to make sure that global supplies of both corn and soybeans are at ample levels. And that's been the case for the past few years.
Next week, we'll be joined by Frayne Olson, our analyst from North Dakota State University. And as always, if you have a question, email us or get in touch on social media, and we'll pass it along to him. Time now for this week's trivia question, and Thanksgiving is just under 2 weeks away, so that's in line with our theme for this week's question. The heaviest turkey ever raised weighed how many pounds? Is it 49 pounds, 75 pounds, 86 pounds, or is it 92 pounds? Make your guess, and I'll have the answer after Al's forecast. Next up, during the 2019 cropping season, Troy Ingram, Nebraska Extension Irrigated Cropping Systems Educator, set out to survey center pivot irrigation systems across the state. His goal was to evaluate pump well performance and pressure and identify areas that need improvement. The project involves using AgSense controllers and pressure transducers to monitor pressure data on these irrigation systems. Ingram also plans to provide information back to cooperating growers and ultimately create a decision tree on how to address pressures that are too low or too high in irrigation systems. Read about the ongoing project and some takeaways from the project's first year in the November Nebraska Farmer. Time now for weather with Al Dutcher. And Al, we had a cold snap earlier this week. Not as frigid right now, though. What's in the forecast for the next several days?
Well, Troy, we did see the cold air come in. Thankfully, it only lasted a couple days, and most of it moved off toward the east of us. Western Nebraska warmed up during the middle of the week. Eastern Nebraska took an extra day. But overall, as we got to the end of this week, we've seen some very warm conditions start to develop, and we're looking at a fairly decent weekend into the early part of next week before we turn our attention to a storm pattern developing as we get into the midweek period and later. In terms of the harvest activity, we were fortunate with the system that came through on Sunday and Monday. We essentially had about a maximum of 2 inches reported in numerous locations in northeast, central, and in the Panhandle. Most water equivalency were in that 0.10 of an inch or less. We did have some isolated reports of 1,500 to 2,500 of liquid equivalent moisture, so nothing really spectacular. And we're in much better shape than the counterparts to our east, which received some very significant snowfall with this system, particularly in southern Michigan, northern Illinois, and southern Wisconsin. Nothing like that is in the forecast immediately, but we will keep our attention to a storm system late next week that has the potential to generate some ugly conditions, at least some portions of the Corn Belt. As we look at today, we have a trough that is moving through the state. It started to move through western Nebraska this morning, and by this afternoon it will move to eastern Nebraska. It will bring a slight cool down in temperatures tomorrow, but overall today should be a very nice day as low pressure stacks up in eastern Nebraska and the Texas Panhandle. There's just no moisture to work with this system, so it's going to be a dry frontal boundary passage. We are still going to be well above normal. By tomorrow, that trough strengthens as it moves to the east. Another piece of energy tries to round the ridge to the west. In between, we're going to see a slight cool down, about 5 degrees across the state in terms of our temperatures, but overall, we can't complain about the day, considering that just to the east of us, we're going to be seeing snowfall and accumulating snowfall up in the Great Lakes region. On Monday, This energy moves around the top of this ridge, bringing us basically cloud cover, but not much in the way of any significant moisture, as low pressure forms over southeastern portions of Missouri, and then helps feed the moisture well to our east and to our north, bypassing the Central Plains. On Tuesday, the ridge starts to rebuild, so we see warmer conditions starting to develop western Nebraska, and that will spread eastward as we go into Wednesday. So we could be looking at some 60s across the Panhandle and southwestern Nebraska. And most of the precipitation, once again, stays well to our east. Northeast Nebraska would be in line for some flurry activities at the closest. On Wednesday, the trough builds in the Central Rockies, and brings a ridge to the eastern portion of the state, bringing warm temperatures to the east. Low pressure forms southwestern Kansas. That's going to help to funnel moisture up. We start to see a convergence of that moisture in the northern Rockies, and as that system progresses, it starts to lose a little bit of its punch momentarily as we see low pressure in the Big Bend region and in south central portions of Iowa. This is going to start to fill in moisture across portions of eastern Texas up to eastern Kansas. The question is, will it make it up into our region? And by Friday, that first system moves rapidly to our east, and another system starts to move across our region, with another low pressure developing in the Texas Panhandle, bringing moisture up into our region. And the question is, will this moisture convergence be farther to the west, or will this be the exact placement? And if this is the exact placement, we're in pretty good shape. If this shifts a little bit farther to the west, it's going to be very stormy across south central and southeastern Nebraska. Further out, 8 to 14-day forecast keeps us in above normal temperatures. And in terms of precipitation, as that stormy pattern continues, we're probably going to see another wave that will impact our region early in the period.
Thanks, Al. Back to trivia now, and this week we're talking turkey. And we want to know the weight of the heaviest turkey ever raised. The answer is C, 86 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about equal to an average 8-year-old. The turkey's name was Tyson, and he won the heaviest turkey competition in London, England in 1989. What a bird! Next up, marketing strategies will undoubtedly vary from operation to operation. Regardless of what crops you're going to sow and harvest, having a plan in place for marketing is always a step in the right direction. This week, Market Journal's Bill Dodd sat down with Ag Econ Extension educator Robert Tigner to discuss a few best management practices that can help producers implement their marketing plan. Bill, what have you got for the folks at home this week?
Thanks, Troy. You know, there's an old adage that failing to plan is planning to fail. The unknown variables of any given marketing year can be numerous and often unpredictable. Whether it's crop size, demand, weather events, or trade impacts, every bit of uncertainty adds up in the end, and utilizing these best practices to put the most advantageous marketing plan in place is a good place to start.
Implementing a few best management practices in your marketing plan can help reduce some of the frustrations of marketing, according to Extension educator Robert Tigner. There are 5 basic practices any given producer should follow when marketing their crop. The first 2 center around the current market fundamentals. This includes knowing your local basis history, as well as taking advantage of free public information and marketing services concerning crop ratings and export pace.
There's this psychology that develops into the marketplace when yield or expected ratings go up. When crop ratings go up, you expect that there's a larger yield, and then you build from that probably a lower price level that is expected after harvest. Export pace shows us part of the demand equation, and if that starts to slow, you start to see a reason for lower prices in the future as well. Basis also indicates to us whether or not there is a large supply locally, and if we should be storing that supply, or if the basis is fairly narrow, it gives us an indication that supply is tight locally. Those are local indications of supply conditions. Basis gives us that local indication of supply conditions.
Basis will also have a strong bearing on your storage plans as well. 2 main bits of information are necessary in determining if storage can boost your net income. 1, the difference in grain prices between delivery, and 2, the cost of storage in long-term versus short-term.
Storage can be useful because we want to get past the low period for basis at the harvest time period, and we want to get past that. We see basis increase get narrower, and then when that narrowing happens, then we want to make some sales. A large crop nationwide or a large crop just locally, that's part of what you're going to pay attention to as well. A large crop locally will widen out the basis, and you're going to probably want to store until that time period is passed, when basis narrows up again, and then you may sell at that point.
One of the most important figures your marketing plan should include is the cost of production. A sufficient understanding of your expected full production cost and cash flow expenditures are a big piece of the puzzle in creating a robust pre-harvest marketing plan.
What that includes are all out-of-pocket items, all cash flow items that you're going to need to continue to farm. We want to meet all our cash flow needs, which includes principal payments on all those items that don't necessarily get included in the economic cost of production, but we want to include all those principal payments, family living, for our taxes, all of those items that are cash costs to us. We want to include that so we know what we need to pay or what we need out of a crop that we produce to meet those cash flow needs.
Like anything in life, contingency is key when formulating your marketing plan. One of the biggest advantages you can have in marketing your crops is going to be your ability to roll with the punches and at least be somewhat prepared for the inevitable and unforeseen supply and or demand shocks to the market.
Ah yes, adjusting your market plan. An excellent example, a year ago when tariffs were applied to U.S. soybeans, that is what's called a demand shock. We didn't really anticipate that would occur, but it did. So at that point, you need to adjust your marketing plan. What your expectations are for price, what your expectations are for demand, and reduce or change. Sometimes you might increase your price expectations, like in 2012. But those kinds of demand and supply shocks give us the opportunity, or should give us the opportunity, to adjust our marketing parameters, our expectations for price, and possibly slow down or speed up our plan, or change so that we have a storage plan in place before we really experience that large crop.
Robert also tells me that the best management practices help in developing a marketing plan that meets the needs of a producer, including cash flow as well as timing and profitability of a farming business. And follow-through after marketing development is necessary for a business to realize the benefits from it. Now, if you'd like more marketing and farm business insights from Robert, be sure to follow his work on Nebraska Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources CropWatch at cropwatch.unl.edu. And that's what I've got my eye on this week. I'll send it back to you, Troy.
Thanks, Bill. The Gateway Farm Expo is the longest-running farm show in Nebraska, and this month it'll be celebrating its 50th year. The event runs from November 20th to the 21st at the Buffalo County Fairgrounds in Kearney, and it brings in over 4,000 visitors and 300 exhibitors. Proceeds from the show help benefit ag education in communities across Nebraska. Market Journal is one of the sponsors this year, and it promises to be a good time. You can learn more at gatewayfarmexpo.org. Finally today, it seems like it's been a year of biblical weather events for farmers around the state, and it hasn't been lost on officials at the USDA. Earlier this month, Nebraska FSA announced payments are now available to eligible producers who lost stored commodities due to natural disasters in 2018 or 2019. The On-Farm Storage Loss Program was authorized by the Additional Supplement Appropriations for Disaster Relief Act of 2019. The program is administered by FSA and provides payments to eligible producers in impacted counties who suffered uncompensated losses of harvested commodities.
It, generally speaking, covers disasters that in Nebraska would be flooding, blizzards, wildfires, tornadoes. Those are kind of the four main disasters that would be applicable here in Nebraska. You know, we know from when we were, and as we've been helping producers through the year with the disaster circumstances we've had, you know, particularly the flooding, that there are producers who have suffered losses of grain and hay commodities that were stored on farm in association, particularly with the flooding. And so we do suspect we'll have applications to this program from producers in those hardest hit areas especially. Presuming that we'll have some along of those counties that are along the Missouri River area, probably up along the Elkhorn, you know, the areas that were really kind of the primary flooding areas throughout the spring. There was some summer flooding as well where there may be some losses also that could be applicable through this program. There has not been a deadline set on this program yet, so we're open right now and taking applications, and producers who have an interest in the program really should just give their county office a call and set an appointment and come in and work through that paperwork with us. It is a fairly simple application process, and so they just need to come in and get that done with us. Once a final deadline has been set, we'll be sure to publicize that so that producers know what that window of time is.
FSA uses a national payment rate per commodity, which is based on market or harvest prices. Payments are calculated using a 75% factored FSA payment rate multiplied by the quantity lost while stored. The on-farm storage loss program has a payment limitation of $125,000 per entity. Adjusted gross income doesn't apply to OFSLP, and an acreage report is not required for this program. For specific commodity payment rates, to submit an application, or for additional program information, contact your local FSA office or visit fsa.usda.gov/NE. That's going to do it for this week's show. Remember, if you missed a story, be sure to download the Market Journal mobile app or follow us on social media to join in on the conversation. Next week, UNL water and agricultural law specialist Dave Aiken will be here to tell us how decisions in the 2019 Nebraska legislature impacted ag and what's next. Plus, get the latest on African swine fever. Hope to see you right back here next time. I'm Troy Moling. Thanks for watching.
Join Market Journal online at marketjournal.unl.edu. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Promotional support is provided by the Nebraska Farmer Magazine and the Gateway Farm Expo. Market Journal is produced by the University of Nebraska's Institute of Agriculture and Natural Resources.